All right, can everyone hear me? And welcome to Oslo Innovation Week and the session on diversity and inclusion. With us here today, we have a bunch of exceptional speakers, and if this was a sort of a music festival, I like to think of this as our little headliner event of at the end of the Oslo Innovation Week. So, see if we can just mute. All right, yeah, so today's session is going to be 1 hour, and we'll be essentially doing 5-minute power pitches from 4 organizations, and followed up with a panel where we'll be asking a bit about how we are actually implementing these innovations or these solutions to accelerate sort of the whole diversity progress in the businesses and organizations in Norway. With us today, we'll have a little poll as well, just in the first phase here, just to get to know you all a bit. Please enter Slido and type in the code M687, and we shall see this works.
M687.
All right, interesting. We've got a few suggestions. We can always come back to this. We'll have this running in the background throughout the session today. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to go into the Q&A section of Slido and ask your questions there. We are recording, and the recording will be shared at a later point. And in the next phase here, we'll have a brief introduction to 4 different solutions as mentioned. So first sort of speaker will be Javad from MAC, giving a bit of the context of next initiatives by MAC, and also a bit of what MAC is. You're up.
Thank you. Maybe you want to stop sharing because I think then. Perfect. Thank you very much, Andres, for starting this conversation here, and appreciate you all being participating today. I think this is a highly exciting session because obviously there's been a lot of conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, why it's beneficial and why we need to focus on it. But at this point of time, we are getting to a point where we need to start to take action. And it's especially exciting to see so many interesting solutions, both from the startup space, utilizing innovation technology to solve some of the challenges we're facing. At the same time as we're also going to see some of the corporate sector and how they're working along with these startups to see how they can accelerate diversity, equity, and inclusion. My name is Javad Mushtaq. I am a 2nd generation Norwegian with a Pakistani background from Halden. My educational background is business and economics. I've been working in more than 4 continents all around the world in the energy space. And I was too often a bit aware of the whole kind of negative narrative around diversity, equity, and inclusion in Norway and the Nordic countries. Most of the times this conversation is revolved around a negative narrative, whereas when we're looking at Norway and the Norwegian context, being a 5.5 million population, we need to think more globally, and we need more diversity in order for us to succeed and create the next wave of value creative startups and companies going forward. So when we started MAC around 5 years ago, it was with the intention of creating a community of talents with non-Norwegian backgrounds to provide a community of belonging, a community where it can be empowered, get access to opportunities, access to competence, and then as a consequence, take leadership positions in relevant corporate companies, but also in relevant startups. Now, over the course of the last 4 to 5 years, we've evolved quite a bit. We've moved from being just a community organization to understand that we're working in a system and being more data-centric and systems change organization. What that essentially means is that we have 3 main areas that we're focusing on. On one side, we have the largest community of non-Norwegian talents in Norway. We're working with empowering them, young talents, typically under age of 35, representing more than 35 countries. We're working with empowering them, providing them access of opportunities, and also democratizing access to leadership roles. On the other hand side, we also knew that we can't only solve one part of the equation, which is empowering the talents. We also need to work with organizations, enable them and empower them and educate them to understand why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so extremely important, not only because it's a moral responsibility for increasing the representation, but also because it's a huge competitive advantage, which is untapped. So we have started working a lot more with organizations. And the third layer we have started working a lot more with as well is thought leadership in society. So how do we reshape the narrative, going from something which has been typically connotated with something negative narrative in the society over the past 10 to 20 years, to talk about the untapped potential and the positive upside of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the society. So over the past 5 years, we've initiated quite a few initiatives, both from events, conferences. We've also educated organizations on both unconscious bias training, but also co-created solutions. And we're also now moving more towards a collaborative environment, because we know that in this whole space, it's a very fragmented space with a lot of players. And it's not a space where we want to compete. We want to collaborate to really accelerate and amplify the impact we want to have. So if you look at this as a football game, we're a team of a lot of players. We have different roles that we play. And if you play together, we can all accelerate our main goal, which is to increase the level of diversity, equity, and inclusion and opportunities in the society and the business world. Some of the collaborative initiatives we have done in the past year has been, along with a few of the people who are represented in the panel today, with Isabel Ringnes and Equality Check. We're now working a bit with the Take Action initiative, which she will talk more about, I assume, on data and transparency. We're working with Sopra Steria and with Hilde and the team on seeing how we can co-create solutions to accelerate diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the organization. And now we're launching a big initiative, which is called the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Pledge, to mobilize some of the leading decision makers, leaders, politicians to start moving the needle. How do we go from only talking about it to having concrete actions? So we'll talk more about it later, but the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Pledge initiative will incorporate a lot of decision makers in Norway to mobilize, going from talk to walking the walk. So I'm super excited to be here today. If you want to learn more about what we do, be involved in the community, you can read more about it. Anders will tell you more about it, but I'll hand it over to the solution side of this and over to Isabel.
Thank you so much, Jawad. That was a very impressive introduction and fire off for this session. I'm very pleased to be part of it as well. So my name is Isabel, and I also have a varied background. I've been living and studying media and technology in New York. I've started several initiatives aimed at increasing diversity, mostly in technology, which is my background, through something called TENK, the Technology Network for Women, where we inspire and hope to educate young girls to lean in and shape the future with their own hands using technology. But what I'm working full-time on today, and where we've been able to create 8 different jobs as of yesterday, is Equality Check. And Equality Check is very easily explained, almost like a TripAdvisor or a Glassdoor for diversity. But the background for this is that my co-founder and I, Marie Sunde, have been working with digital campaigns through something called Hun spanderer to address unconscious bias and gender stereotypes in society since around 2015. And in 2017, we were invited to the UN Women Conference in New York. And I remember the executive director's words very, very well, where she said that every generation has a mission to fulfill or betray, and ours is achieving gender equality. So in 2018, Marie and I decided that it was time to empower the people and to include the many voices that have stories to tell, and to leverage the power of technology to accelerate equal opportunities for everyone, hopefully globally, and that led us to Equality Check. So we leverage equality to create radical transparency and catalyze equality. So in short, anyone can leave a completely anonymous review about the company that they work for, and they can research other companies to see how other employees rate equal opportunities, unconscious bias, work-life balance, and more. And then in regards to various different diversity aspects such as gender and ethnicity and age and gender identity and religion and other unique traits. And then by leaving a review, we all add transparency to the workplace, because there isn't that much transparency around these things today, which Javad touched upon as well. And we offer companies valuable insights as to how they can improve with the ultimate goal of creating equal opportunity and diverse workplaces globally, because we believe that transparency is the key to accountability and change. We also aim to be at the forefront of mapping global challenges and empowering the people. So the past year, 2020, has been dramatic to say the least. And when Corona broke out, we were one of the first in Norway, at least, to launch a survey mapping how the pandemic would affect gender equality or equality in general and discrimination in the workplace, where we presented the results together with the Minister of Gender Equality in Norway and in Sweden through our Swedish partners Make Equal. And then during Pride in June, we launched a national campaign together with Pride and Skeiv Ungdom to see how much action there truly is behind all the rainbows and all the different companies' marketings. And then following the Black Lives Matter protests in the US, we teamed up with leading ethnic minority organizations such as MUC, which we are very proud of, in Norway, to map the level of systemic racism in the Norwegian workplace. And that is also the background for the T-shirt campaign that I'm very happy to see that Javad is wearing for this occasion. Unfortunately, mine is dirty. I've been wearing it so much. But basically, we've engaged now 35 ambassadors from all different walks of life and different aspects of society to go out very visibly, post on their social channels to the audience that they reach with this message that basically calls for more transparency, more data on how we're actually doing in Norway, and then hopefully the end goal being, well, that we are more aware of the problems that we have and that we have a clear path to how we can start solving them. So we've reached now 2.5 million different people in 1 month. And I think in the interest of time, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for those few introductory notes. We'll present also now Jens and his solution representing Test Hub.
Thanks, and thank you for having me. We are a concrete action point when it comes to one specific problem, that's unconscious bias, as both Javad and Isabel were talking about. This is really, really tough for people to mitigate with, it's unconscious. So what we've done is we built a software as a service platform that minimizes bias with automated blind screening. So people are anonymized and screened on 3 traits that predicts work performance. That is GMA, integrity, and personality trait conscientiousness. And these are the 3 top traits that predicts work performance. So we are trying to push the needle in the right direction by actually giving somebody or companies a concrete tool to use to document that they're actually doing something about unconscious bias. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Super, thank you so much. And last up, we have Hilde, who I will also share some slides here.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to this event. It's a good opportunity for us to share and learn and tell you a bit about how we work on this in Soprasteria. And our journey on this is, I think it's a similar journey that every company, big or small, need to take. And That is, you start answering your whys. Why is this topic important to you? And you have to start on a journey which is hard and long. And I will share a bit about that journey and also some lessons we learned so far. So next slide. The why does companies need to work on diversity and inclusion? It's obvious to the people in this meeting, but I think every company who's going to start on this topic and this journey needs to really dive into this topic of why and finding their own answers to why. And I think when you have done that kind of work in your organization, you probably will not end up with a very unique list. It will normally contain the same topics as we have here at the Soprasteria. But so the outcome and this list isn't really the biggest benefit from this, but the discussions you have around this question of why, that is what is important. And it's the same list I think everybody will end up with, because it's something to do with innovation, creating new businesses. It's a clear expectation from stakeholders these days. Especially we have a push from our employees to make a statement and to be active on the whole spectrum of diversity. And when it comes to recruit the young people that you want on board, they're obviously looking for a company to be themselves and to feel included in. So it's also of course a positive effect on building brands. And it's obvious it's the right thing to do. You know, it makes you feel good to work on these topics because it feels right. And actually, I got some very interesting comments from some of our employees that shouldn't this the right thing to do? Actually, everybody knows it's the right thing to do. Shouldn't that be enough? Do we need to all include all this innovation stuff, all this positive business outcomes and things like that? Isn't it enough to just to know that you're doing the right thing? So that's an interesting comment, I think. But I think adding topics to this list, answering this why, it's useful, and especially when you're talking to the top management in the company. Okay, next. We realized from the very start that this is something challenging, this is difficult, and we needed somebody to discuss with and somebody to challenge us and somebody to kind of push us forward. So we looked around to find somebody to partner up with, and through one of our former employees, we was introduced to MAC. So we signed an agreement with them for more than a year ago now, and it actually has been very useful. And I think the most benefit we have had so far, it gave us the agenda to put this on the top management. You can see Javad in this picture handshaking our CEO. And you should never underestimate the value of somebody from the outside talking about this, instead of only being like the HR people, the CR people, and things like that. So it's a good thing to have other people from the outside telling you the importance and challenging you this. So it kind of moved things forward in our company to get this agreement on board. Next. So where do we start? We started by looking into the strategies and the visions of the company in general, and not really related only to the topic of diversity, but the general strategy of the company. And you see a statement here that we want to be a great place to work for the best consultants in tech. That statement or vision has been with the company for a long time, and it's a very obvious bridge into the topic of diversity, because the best consultants, they come in every shapes, every colors, every education, every background, and they are really hard to find. So to be able to be attractive as we want to, we really have to show an internal culture that includes everybody, and to be a positive and to talk positive about diversity when we are in the recruitment position. And it's not only to talk about it when you're recruiting people, you have to show when they come on board and be a part of the company that this is really something you work on and take seriously. So we started from there. This is the vision of the company, and we have to build it from there. Next. So we kind of drew a map how to work on this. And it's, of course, the facts speaks from itself. And so we started diving into those figures and numbers and surveys and things that we had. And when it comes to gender, you know that very well, Isabel. It's very easy to talk about figures and facts when it comes to gender because it's easy to count. Also, when it comes to education, age, things like that. But when it comes to more intercultural background, these facts are not so very obvious. So the facts we found around the topic of intercultural diversity was that when we looked into the competence base of the company, we found that more than 50 different languages is spoken by employees in our company. And that's at least some expression of a cultural mix. But when we surveyed and asked people, do you identify yourself with an intercultural background? Only 10% of the company's employees answered a positive question statement on that. So 10%, I don't know, is it much or is it little? I don't know, but at least it gave us a picture that where we stand. And next step for us was really to start, oh, you can stay on that slide, going to the next point on number 2 there. The next step was to start talking about it broadly with a different kind of people in the organization, talking about gender, so diversity in general and intercultural diversity in specific. And when you talk to people about these topics, it's really interesting because you get as diverse answers as there are diverse people. Some people said, don't touch it, don't go there. We don't want anyone to, I don't want to feel any different or any treated in a different way because I have an intercultural background. So don't go there. I don't want to be part of this. And other people said that it's really time you start speaking up. This is really crucial to me as a person. So it was a whole range of different attitudes towards that. When we had kind of identified some point in the starting point and some views from the people in our organization, of course, we have to onboard our CEO and the top management. You can't have anything done in a company if you don't have that alignment behind you. So he started talking and he made some statements on our internal social medias and things like that. He published a diversity policy on our intranet and externally. So it was kind of a starting point. And now I think we are on step 4, which is both hard and something simple. Hard things is setting good targets. How do we really measure this? And you could also have the discussion, do we really need to measure? And why do we need to measure? And then how do we measure it and following up? We are right now in the beginning of facilitating some webinars for all our employees and for some workshops from people in management positions, start identifying the action to be taken. And we have luckily to have Mark and Javad on board on that one. So we're looking forward to that. It's going to be next week. And also we're going to set up some trainings around for managers and how to be a good inclusive leader. But I think these are kind of the easy things to do. The next step we have is to create some more role models, getting some more allies on board and starting to make a broader community within our organization to really address and work on these topics. And now, Andres, you can go to the next slide. Lesson learned so far. The time was due, more than overdue, I would say. Our employees was challenging us. And we also found very useful guidance in the Norwegian standard leading diversity and working on standards. That doesn't seem very sexy, does it? And it's not very cool, not very fun, but it actually was very useful, and it is very useful. I think find the standard very descriptive, and it tells very concrete how to do work on this. So it was very useful to us to use that as guidelines. But we also realized, and that perhaps why we're talking about it, as actually going from words to action, that is difficult, because what are the real and concrete and visible actions to really take on this topic? So we are struggling with that. What actions are the right one and the next one? And that includes also how to measure. But we also realized that being pushed from the outside, that's how we have used Mach and UJava especially to do that and question us and challenge us. That has been very useful. And we also realized experience that it's a very positive effects on very small things actually. And I'll tell you just a very short story about that. And it's about the LHBT, did I say it right now? Yeah. And during Pride period, we put out there some marks for people to put on their computers, just small symbols. And there was this person who was in an interview with one of our managers. He applied for a job at our company, and he saw this little mark on the computer to the manager, this rainbow symbol, and nothing was said about it. Nothing was not in the interview process. It was not addressing anything about diversity. But he told me afterwards, after he signed the contract and joined us, that just seeing this symbol on the computer of this manager told him that this is a person I want to work for. I want this person as a manager, my manager, because he has the right attitudes and he has the right perspectives. So that was kind of an learning for us that small things can make a change. And we also realize now that this is not a quick fix. It's not an event. It's an ongoing journey. And the challenges we have ahead of us is we still is an organization dominated by these male pale 40s, especially in the management part of the organization. And not to offend these people, but from their perspective, this is not a problem. And we all have these biases, and accepting these biases and realize how we can work around them, that's a challenge. And we also have to, I also meet statements like, okay, we have this 10% of people from different backgrounds. I have people from different cultures in my management group. So we have diversity in place in this organization to get them to understand that it's not about numbers, but it's about culture and how you use the competencies and how you involve people. That's, I think, our learning so far. And thank you, and back to you, Andres.
Thank you so much. It's been a very good introduction to also some of the ups and downs. I think in the next phase of this session, where we'll actually break into like a panel. So it will be some questions, and feel free to answer each other out and comment as you were, if this was a couch of some sorts. So I think that the first one, I think we'll kind of address to the solution side on sort of the other side of the table. In this, increased momentum of more need for solutions, what's been the main needs, or how do you say, what's been the change from sort of selling or partnering with companies this year versus the last year? Maybe Jens, if you want to take a stab at it in the first.
There's a huge difference for us, because when we started pitching this a year ago, unconscious bias was, something that had to be explained, and some people didn't want to hear it, and still some people don't want to hear it. And it's uncomfortable to know that you're biased. That's a big step for some people to admit, especially if you're in our role or HR recruitment and you've been doing something of the same for 40 years, and then somebody young like me come and tell you that you've been doing it wrong for 40 years. That's not really always a good thing. But I feel like now that we're pitching, I think it's partly because of Black Lives Matter and all the attention now to the issues, that people are more open to understanding and to want to understand, and they start realizing that, okay, unconscious bias is a fact. It's not something. It's not a theory. This is what is consensus in psychology, and we feel now that even though we haven't landed really big partners yet, we are in dialogue with several big companies right now who have unconscious bias on their strategy document. They're trying to solve it. And I think the timing now for a tool like ours is optimal. And I think the acceptance of this just being a human thing is there now. And that opens up for doing something about it.
How about you, Isabel? I saw recently this week probably about how you're tackling fake reviews of on the platform, and I think it's a sort of a testament that there is definitely a volume out there for the topic, and what's been changing this month, these past months.
Do you mean in terms of society being susceptible to the conversation on diversity, or how do you mean exactly?
Yes, so if the volume of reviews have supposedly increased, meaning there's more sort of data, or if you will, momentum, has this changed in the positive, or like what kind of reflections do you have on this?
So, well, we've kind of been riding this horse for a long time. When we started back in 2015, basically, as you felt also, Jens, last year, but basically no one thought that we were onto anything. They were all kind of like, well, Norway's gender equal, you know, this is nothing. You guys are just trying to make a problem out of nothing. And then after having worked with it for, I think, 3 years, we suddenly saw that, okay, now there is, you know, genuine interest in business society. People are accepting that this is a problem. They're realizing that this is something that we want to do something about. But again, and as you were touching upon as well, Hilde, is that despite the fact that a lot of people have ambitions to do something, it's not always so easy to know exactly what to do. And for very good reason. One of the other aspects or motivations behind why we started Equality Check was basically the insights that, yes, there is so much research on the actual problem. There is very little research on the solutions. And that's kind of why we embarked on this research project together with CORE as well, who are looking into what basically exists out there in terms of solutions that actually have a cause and effect validation, and not just a correlation or based on a best practice in some company, but also looking at the data that we gather from the different companies to see if there's solutions that are there that could be applied to different companies. Because as you also pointed out, there is no one fix. There is not a quick fix. It's a combination of very many different things. But in terms of attention around diversity the past year, it's interesting how diversity moves in trends. So gender was very big around Me Too, and now it's ethnicity is bigger, and it's a good thing. In the end, it's all about, you know, seeing the individual for being an individual, regardless of kind of their background or their unique traits. So I think for Equality Checks, or from Equality Check's point of view, we have seen a lot more interest just because we did launch in January. So we've only been around for what, 9 months. So about now we would be giving birth to a real baby if it'd been growing for 9 months now, which is kind of what it feels like, to be honest. But what we are doing is like we're gathering trust from people, because obviously anonymity is very, very important to us. And so is the integrity in the data, where you referred to the fake reviews. So we're constantly working really, really hard to make sure that everything is truthful and that it's honest and that it's constructive. And we are seeing a solid curve going upwards in terms of engagement, and also people wanting to give us the data so that we can, I mean, because obviously this is not data that we keep for ourselves. This is data that we democratize and aggregate and make available and accessible for free for everyone, so that this is something that we can all make use of. That was a long answer to your question, but
that was perfect. I think it's super insightful, because we have at least a lot of people. I mean, in our company that I work at the daytime, we've also been initiating some starting some initiatives, and sometimes you get this kind of like paralysis by analysis. You just don't know where to start. You're trying to assess everything, and you just gotta have like the bold moves to, you know, not know exactly where everything is gonna lead into, but some direction is actually better than stagnant sort of or static situation. Maybe Javad, if you want to fill in on some of the aspects of why top management, or like why is like the pledge something that is seen as a good approach from Mac's point of view.
Sure, absolutely, and I think I'm just gonna continue on the great kind of perspectives that both Jens and Isabella has presented so far. I do think that, I mean, I've been working in this space on a voluntary basis with different initiatives and projects for more than 10 years, and with obviously with MOC for the past 5 years. And I don't think, especially when it comes to intercultural and ethnic diversity, there hasn't been as much traction as it has been now in light of Black Lives Matter. And as Isabel was rightfully mentioning as well, I think sometimes we do get those shocks or some like big events, which is just pushing the envelope a bit. So we know that there's still 100 years, ahead of us to reach gender parity according to World Economic Forum reports. And how do we really accelerate that? And how do we really push that? And I think when we get those larger events like Me Too and events like Black Lives Matter, which we've seen in the past few months, there's really like a boost for the whole kind of conversation. There's a boost in terms of the engagement. There's a boost in terms of leaders wanting to kind of get involved, whether that's because they really kind of truly believe in the business case of the side of this, or even if they don't believe in it, they're too afraid to kind of lose out or the negative consequence of not getting involved. But things are happening, and I think there's a different conversation now. And I also think the bottom-up approach, where you have the employees now kind of asking questions to leadership and management, and putting them kind of to the wall, saying that what are we actually doing in terms of this is actually very positive as well. So I think there is a lot of things we can get involved into, and I think we just need to acknowledge that different kind of actors in the ecosystem working on diversity, equity, and inclusion will have different areas of focus that they're really, really good at, and we need to play together in order for us to really kind of create that systemic change, and not just that suboptimal change by focusing on one initiative and just pushing the problem in a separate phase of the life cycle of the career. So in our case, I mean, we've worked a lot with top managements. We know that there is a huge willingness for top management. We know from the research part of this that if we want to create change, we need to get the top management on board. We need to have a strategic anchoring and need to be embedded within the organization, their strategy, the organization kind of way of conducting business. And then, post that, obviously get to the point where you need to acknowledge how big the problem is, where data is a key, where initiatives like a quality check is essential. And then you need to kind of work on the kind of the life cycle to reduce unconscious bias and have solutions like Jens and Test Hub. And then you have corporate to acknowledge that we do have a problem with, we don't always have solutions. How can we work with open innovation or with communities and solutions outside our own organization to really kind of start testing out and pivoting to see what works and doesn't work. So in our case, the diversity, equity, and inclusion is just kind of formalizing the commitment from top management. So we have a lot of leaders now who are just talking about, we do acknowledge this, we want to do something. We don't know where to start. We don't have the right toolbox or the starter kit. We don't know how to get committed. And we want to leverage on that to really kind of make a formal commitment. We have defined around up to 10 different bullet points that we get top leaders to sign on, including data collection, including kind of reduction of unconscious bias, including trainings, etc. And obviously we'll also provide them with the right toolkit in that process. This is something, hopefully, which is the first kind of hook in to get the top leader anchoring on board. And then as a consequence of that, the top leaders in different organizations, both large corporations and startups and in private sector, public sector, volunteer organization, they can also start utilizing the toolbox which exists in companies like Quality Check, Test Hub, etc., to really kind of start going from the conversation to actually having concrete initiatives and move the needle.
It's absolutely, I think it's the way I like to look at it, at least, is that companies need a kind of tech stack of sorts, just how you operate your company. You have maybe a CRM, you have some intranet, you have these different tools. So maybe Hilde, from like the kind of consumer side, or the person who is trying to implement and acquire these solutions, what kind of challenges, besides the ones that you maybe highlighted now in your opening remarks, have you seen like a willingness to kind of co-create from technologies or from partnering companies to make it more flexible, I guess, from your point of view?
I think just only today, I think I got 2 mails into my mailbox from different kind of startups addressing different kind of diversity topics. So it's a lot of initiatives around this. And I think it's to us as a company and also for us internally, but also to work on our clients on these topics. It's very interesting for us and very good to have this being approached by all these startups and small companies who have solutions like the one Jens is presenting here. And Jens, could you please help us to take out our biases of the recruitment process? Please help us because it's challenging. I really would like.
I just want to add to that. I think it's impossible to completely remove all biases, but there's some elements that you could do. And we have attacked the pre-screening part, because as soon as we know identity and as soon as we see people, we will be biased by them. So doing a blind screening is key. It's really key, but there aren't too much else to do. I'm sorry. Their technology hasn't caught up yet.
But already now I hear you have some insights that we could use. So I understand you can't take all the biases away, because then you have to operate our brains. That's not possible. But what I would like to comment on is this topic of facts and figures. And I said it myself, we dived into the figures, and working in an organization with a lot of analytical engineers, of course, taking an analytical approach and looking into the figures is key. But I have kind of a mixed feeling around that, because I've experienced that when I present figures, there is only a request for more figures, and they're addressing and I got questions about more details, more figures to dive more deep into it. And we can dig into this as far as we know, as far as we want, but it doesn't really move us forward, because we we can look around and see there's not a very diverse workforce we have. So we can get lost in the need for figures. And if we believe that diversity is not really all about figures, it's about the culture we create. And by that, I mean, how do we actually use the people with all this diverse perspective and competencies and insights that we already have on board? Is there a culture of open, are we challenging each other? Are we listening to each other? Are we kind of using all this knowledge this diversity really brings? And that much more harder to measure, and we can't really, perhaps we can't really measure that. So I think I would like our company to focus more on that part of diversity, using the diversity and letting it, knowledge and insight from that, shine and come forward, and not be stuck in the figures. So I think it's a fine balance there between having some facts, being able to measure things and talk to my colleagues with these engineer brains. But we also have to not get stuck in there and be able to work with a culture where we can actually benefit from the diversity and make that's how it really matters. So I don't know, Isabel, what do you think about this? Now you've been experiencing these things yourselves.
I think you're very right on a lot of the things that you're saying. It seems like you're working with it pretty well. I do recognize a lot of the things that you are highlighting as initiatives that you've implemented. They are the same things that we have both researched but also experienced through the companies that we work with. The one thing that you really highlight is getting CEOs, the top management on board, them becoming ambassadors and truly like communicating and inspiring the rest of the organization. They're basically the ones who have the power to do that. So that's important. And also having what you say, and what it's kind of clear that you guys have already done is having like a holistic strategy on these things, thinking about it from multiple perspectives and being open to trying multiple different things, and also being open to the fact that there's a big chance that you might fail at some of the things. Not all of them are going to work perfectly, but then at least you've tried and learn from them and try to bring those learnings into future practices, because what often happens, and this is probably why McKinsey also reports that from all the companies that try to increase diversity or gender balance in this case, it's only 24% that succeed. And the reason is that, you try something, it doesn't work, and you give up. And I mean, basically everything in life that you try and it doesn't work the first time, if you give up, you're never going to learn anything, because that's just the way you learn things. And the same goes for diversity. So another thing that I've actually seen in a few companies that have been successful, it's kind of a more like a harder or more concrete practice, is that they've set KPIs the same way that they've set results-based KPIs, and they incentivize their managers on those things as well. So it's not just kind of, okay, diversity is important to us, and in 50 years we're going to have 50%. Have ambitious but realistic goals. Like, obviously you can't have or say that you have 50% women. So if your board is 90% men, 10% women, you probably won't be able to have 50% women within the next 2 years. But what you can do is make sure that on the entry level that you have 50%, and that on all new hires on all the other different levels, you have 50% women coming in, or that you make sure that you have more diversity in general in all of the different levels coming in. And then having really a data-driven approach to that. So making sure that you're actually measuring yourself on these things, because if you don't count it, it doesn't count, as we all know. And I think what's interesting about Equality Check, if I can just highlight that too, is that as an employer, you cannot ask employees about their different unique traits, such as their ethnicity or their religion or their sexuality and so on. Whereas Equality Check is a third party, we do not have any kind of employee or interest in anyone responding. So, and obviously this is also something that they choose to respond to completely voluntarily. And we're also compliant with GDPR, of course. Whereas companies can actually get really good insights on how different subgroups at their company perceive the culture. So you can see if there are differences between, for example, an ethnic minority male 30 years old and a woman 50 years old, for example, where you can start to see if there's actually structural differences in the way that people perceive a culture. So that was a long and weird answer all over the place, but we only have 10 more minutes, so I'm just going to stop talking.
I'll just continue a bit on what Isabel said, because I think it's extremely interesting, and I think having some specific objectives with KPIs, I mean, measure what matters and hold people accountable for that makes a lot of difference. And it doesn't have to be big, as Isabel says. Sometimes an organization set the target to say that we need to have 50% recruited in, and sometimes you don't have qualified people. If you can't find the qualified people, you need to kind of find them in new arenas. You need to source them in networks and communities that you can't really find them. And if they're not qualified enough candidates, then you have an obligation to start an early stage, to start qualifying those candidates. Increase the amount of women who take educational degrees which are underrepresented when it comes to gender, etc. And then I think another point I just want to highlight is the role of allies. And in a lot of cases where I go to gender equality conversations or ethnic minority conversations, it's typically people who are of the same gender and or the same ethnical background, and you're sitting there preaching to the choir. The people you need to convince are typically not in the room. So how do you start, instead of saying making, let's say in a case of gender equality, saying that men are the problem, how do you have them as your allies to be in a position where you can start increasing the women on board as well, right? How do you have the balance, instead of saying that you're the problem, you're also the part of the solution? So I think allies is extremely important in the whole process of increasing that as well. There's a lot of things you can do. I know there's a short time, Andrew, so I'm not going to take on it as well, but I think it's better to do something small than doing nothing.
Absolutely. I think we actually got 2 questions from Slido. So if there are anyone who's dying to ask something, please go ahead. We have one to Jens, and his question is that wanted to understand better how the 3 criteria that Test Hub Tech uses to assess candidates, and if you could maybe elaborate a bit on this.
Yeah, I can give you the secret sauce right away, and that's because we believe that the space has room for a lot of people. We kind of hope companies all over the world copy this a bit. But first of all, this is an improper linear model. So first Google that improper linear model, and you'll see that, wow, that's a little bit of a revolution, just that. In our improper linear model, we, like I said, investigate 3 traits. And it's really important for us to always be able to base our assumptions on data. And this is from a meta-analysis going back 100 years, where all the research articles back 100 years, the accumulated research indicates that the top 3 traits that you always should test people for are GMA, especially GMA in combination with integrity. That's by far has the highest predictability. And then you have conscientiousness or planmessighet in a nice 3rd place. Just since I'm geeky now, and you obviously are interested, whoever asked the question, we are very proud of this formula because it simplifies the process, and you have much less need for data input, and it's much less room for sample error when you do this approach. So it's a huge difference between what's out there right now, because right now it's psychometric testing is the alternative. This is elements of psychometric testing, but it's a formula, it's a prediction formula. Yeah, one more comment. We know that integrity and GMA is the best predictor. What is less known is that conscientiousness is negatively correlated with GMA. That means that you can be very intelligent, but have a very low score on conscientiousness and vice versa. But if you have both those traits, they are both by themselves really good predictors of general work performance. So we had to give people something, because we want blind screening. That's our take on this. And that's the only way to really mitigate for unconscious bias in the screening process. But at the same time, we need to have a really good metric to give people, since we're ranking individuals, and we are on quite solid ground academically. So I hope that answered that question. And if you're interested, all this is described on our webpage and under About Us in a way too long text. So if you're really, really nerdy about it, please read it all and send me an email, and I'll rant much more about this.
That's great. We had just a small follow-up, and that's what does the GMA stand for?
General mental ability. So that is it's intelligence, but it's the most known way of measuring intelligence is GMA. It's the most used method.
Thank you so much. And then we have kind of like to all panelists. I think we'll try to scope it so that we have about 60 seconds per panelist. And if you have one piece of advice on how to support an organization to acknowledge areas of poor performance in terms of supporting diversity. So I'll ask that again. Do you have advice for how to support an organization to acknowledge areas of poor performance in terms of diversity? Maybe Jawad, you want to go first?
No, I mean, one, I think there needs to be a transparency in communication. You just need to kind of voice that out. You need to have a conversation with your leadership, and you need to have a channel where you can voice this. And 2, you can go to equality check and you leave a review, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually, that's the easiest question that I've got today. Definitely use equality check, and if you get constructive reviews that maybe are not as good as you hoped, dare to think about what kind of feedback this really is, and instead of being scared that it's there, think about what you can actually do to get better, and be happy that you know, because it's worth not knowing, because then your organization will continue the same way as it always has. And hopefully you want to be an organization where employees are happy and feel included and feel like they can use their potential. And in doing that, they have to be able to speak up and let you know. And equality check is a good way to do that, because it's not on the employer's terms, and it's anonymous. And it's also important for me to say that we are very positive in the way that we approach this problem. So our platform is entirely based around celebrating the companies that do well. We have lots of top 10 lists, and then we are not very interested in highlighting the companies that perform not so well. but we are always there to support and to help them. But Equality Check is a good start to become aware of the areas of improvement that you have.
To add to that one, of course, it's already said about the top management engagement, and so I won't repeat that. Next an advice I think is a good starting point is to actually start the conversation within the organization. There are people in HR, there are people working on CR who are responsible for this kind of work. So start talking to the people around you, get some support, get some ideas, get some insight. How do they feel who are in the middle of this? And it will give you a momentum also to go to the top management of the company and say, this is something that our people really cares about. This is something we cannot overlook or ignore. This is happening around us now, and this is what our employees are really caring about. So we have to start working on this.
Yeah, I would just add change your job, because it is really hard to change people. And if you're in a company that obviously is not prioritizing this and doesn't seem to care, it's going to be really tough to change them. So if that's important for you, I would look for Soprasteria, this career site or something like that, because people are tough to change.
Super. And we have now, I think, 3 minutes left. And I think in sort of like the broad terms here, we've seen obviously a lot of agreeing. I guess it's true what was said earlier, that we're not really trying to convince anyone here in this room. It's about like being pragmatic about what solutions should we be talking about and learning about. And I hope people who are interested really check out each one of you out, and the companies, their solutions, actions, and so on. I think at least from sort of like the consumer side, you want to just make sure everyone's kind of held accountable when we're at the end of the day. You want to ensure that it's not just a lot of talking, but it's going through with it. So now the Slido is filling up with a lot of thanks to the panelists. So I'll keep that also in mind, that to thank you everyone for participating on this rainy Oslo evening. And hope that if there are any other ideas on solutions, please link up on social media. We'll leave some details in the event on Facebook and LinkedIn shortly, along with the recording. So until next time, I would like to just leave it at that.
Thank you so much.
You guys have a nice evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.